If there was ever a single story that kept what little humanity was left among the stars trudging ever onward, it was the tale that in Persean Sector anyone can make it big. After all, you didn't have to look that far to see examples of this tale, like pirate captains who amassed great armadas and became warlords dreaded by entire civilized space, or ambitious officers who defied orders of their superiors and became leaders of their own nations. Or even lowly hive slummers who clawed their way to the very top of post-domain society, proving to everyone that relentless determination pays off. But what those uplifting tales usually omit is the fact that for every successful story, there were thousands upon thousands of decidedly less hopeful ones about those who did not make it, of people who were not good enough, not strong enough or resourceful enough, or sometimes were simply not lucky enough. And one of those bad stories was exactly what happened to the small, two-person crew of a dinky old shuttle that, despite all evidence to the contrary, somehow made its way to the planet of Jangala. "Oh yeah, boss," the woman sitting in the co-pilot's seat said, staring with increasing terror at the console in front of her. "The reactor's glitched out again. We're lit up like a bleeding Christmas tree." "I know," the man next to her said, his voice muted somewhat by a very old helmet he was wearing. "And I'm pretty sure we're also leaking AM fuel. Make sure you don't bump into anything or we'll all go supernova," the woman added. "I know," the man replied, his hands clinging desperately to controls that only sometimes responded to his commands. "And now that I'm thinking about it," the woman continued, "how exactly are you willing to pay me for this last month?" "I know," the man said. Clearly, he had something else on his mind, and it's not like there was time for talking anyway, as the destination of our unlucky crew appeared in the viewport. There it was, a small blue-green dot slowly growing in the distance, the planet Jangala, one of Hegemony's core worlds. It was truly a sight to behold, an entire world covered in oceans and lush, jungle-like vegetation. One could even think that it would be a perfect tourist destination, until you remembered that the local fauna did its level best to eat any human it could find, while the flora relentlessly tried to turn everything into spore-infested fungus. But at least the beaches were nice, if you remembered to always keep your EnviroSuit on. But our heroes were not here on a sightseeing trip. No, their destination wasn't the planet itself, but a massive space station that orbited it, where they hoped to patch themselves up, and that station spotted them first. "Unidentified catch shuttle, we do not have you on inbounds list. Please identify yourself immediately and state your intent," a vaguely threatening voice said over the comms. "We are identifying ourselves," the man in the pilot's seat replied. "Our transponder is on." "Is it now?" The voice on the comms didn't sound convinced. "Then in that case your reactor must be going completely haywire, cause all we're seeing here is a massive-ass energy signature. It's like you're piloting a bloody battlecruiser, so either fix it the hell up or name yourselves before I send a patrol to you." The pilot sighed. This really was not his day, or, well, his decade, to be perfectly honest. "Fine," he said. "This is Cart Logistics ship Valiant Replacement. This is Mr. Cart speaking. We had some issues in the dark space out there, as you can see from the state of our ship, and we came here to get some repairs. Also, our engines only respond to my commands sometimes, so I'd really appreciate it if you could turn off the missile lock on us. I'm trying to stop, believe me, but the bloody thing is not listening to me." "Acknowledged, Valiant Replacement. Hold for confirmation." "Let's hope he won't notice that we're also leaking fuel," the woman said in the silence that followed. "CLS Valiant Replacement, you are leaking antimatter fuel from your tanks," the man on the comms said, and both crew members on the shuttle rolled their eyes. Just their goddamn luck. For a moment there was silence on the line, and then the voice spoke up again, this time sounding a bit less robotic and detached. "Ah, fuck it, I'm not gonna be a dick just cause some regulation wrote by some disjointed, dirt-pounding bureaucrat says so. Listen here, Replacement, I can't let you dock in this state, there's too much chance of an explosion when your drive feels so fucked up. So power down, and I'll send towing drones to hold you in. Normally it would cost you, but looking at the state of your ship, I don't think you can afford it anyway." Thanks, Chief," Mr. Cart said, genuinely surprised by the offer. "We won't forget that." "Bloody damn well hope you won't. Except if Port Commander asks, then feel free to not remember a damn thing. Right, now power the hell down, sending drones your way," the tower said and disconnected. The crew of Valiant Replacement obeyed the order and turned off their reactor, hoping their suits had enough backup power and oxygen. Then they stared at each other. "They'll never believe me back home," the woman said with a crooked smile. "A hegemony official who wasn't a complete asshat. Are you sure we haven't died and went to heaven?" "Don't think they'll let us in, Varuna," the pilot replied. "I think the port commander here is underpaying his people again, so they don't give a shit." "Thank the stars for good old corruption. So, we made it. Didn't think we'd actually get out in one piece, but here we are. Well, what's left of us anyway. You owe me a leg." "I'll get you one as soon as I can access our account. Hopefully this prosthesis we whipped out will work out until then." The woman looked at the jerry-rigged piece of metal that replaced her limb below the knee and wondered, not for the first time, just how the hell her boss managed to make it seemingly from random scrap metal they found on the ship. But he'd never tell her anyway, and since she didn't want to seem ungrateful, she said, "It will. Makes me walk like a penguin, the damn thing, but it's better than not having a leg at all. Also, boss, cart logistics? Really?" "Hey, it sounds legal and innocent enough," he replied, and then, as if to end the discussion, added, "Alright, but first things first. Once they tow us in, do we do it the regular way? You go down to the station and I stay here and walk the markets and do the regular maintenance?" "Out of curiosity, boss, what would happen if I said no?" "Well," the man started, not really fazed by the son question, "I'd probably threaten to fire you and pretend to be angry so it would sound kinda believable. Then you'd do your usual sad puppy eyes and try to play on my emotions, which would of course not work, cause as you always like to say yourself, the only emotion I feel is greed. Then we'd argue for a moment and eventually we'd just do things as usual because, as much as we may bitch and complain, we're not exactly hireable, so we can't go anywhere else. Like it or not, Miss Europa, you're stuck with me, just like I'm stuck with you." "Very motivating, boss. But you're right, so let's not disrupt the status quo, eh?" She gave him a blank look with just a tiny flicker of annoyance and amusement in her eyes. "Also, once I'm down on the dock, do me a favor and check out the definition of rhetorical question." Mr. Cart was about to reply something, but in that moment the shuttle rumbled, signaling the arrival of the towing drones. It was as his co-pilot said, they made it, but only now it felt real. So, instead of continuing their pointless bickering, the crew of Valiant Replacement started preparing to disembark and made plans on what to do once on board of Jangala Station. Yes, repairs and account management were important, but the first thing Varuna wanted to do, no matter the circumstances, was to take a shower. Their old ship might have had luxuries like running water, but after almost 2 months on board of Replacement, all other needs were overridden by sheer, overwhelming desire to finally stop stinking like a sweaty corpse. She briefly wondered if she should ask her boss to accompany her, but then again she wasn't sure Mr. Cart ever showered once in his life, and she knew better than to ask. And besides, it's not like her boss would come down on the dock anyway, and in fact, he already disappeared into the bowels of their shuttle, mumbling something about critical repairs. 15 minutes later, another rumble informed them that the docking claps of Jangala Station firmly gripped their flimsy shuttle, and Varuna, with a bright, optimistic smile on her face, disembarked, filled all the necessary paperwork out of the board customs officer desk, and rushed to the nearest hygiene block, shoving away everyone in her way. When she came back to the ship 7 hours later, however, that smile was nowhere to be found. "Oi, took your time, did ya?" Mr. Cart said, emerging from behind some panels as she entered. He was covered in grease. "Got the ship patched up a bit while you were gone and, something wrong?" "A bit, yes," she said, looking tired. "I couldn't find any work for us. Turns out place is completely locked down. There's hegemony military everywhere, and not just the Navy but also ground pounders as well. Can't walk 2 steps without running into a checkpoint out there." "Which means every potential employer has gone to the ground. And let me guess, the only people left in bars and cantinas are High Hegemon's recruiters." "Unfortunately, aye. 2 of them tried to convince me to join the Navy, and one sleazy bastard even tried to enlist me as his adjutant." She said that last word with utter disgust. "If only they knew," Mr. Cart replied, wiping grease on his envirosuit, making it even more dirty. "Well, did you at least figure out why the place is scrolling with troops?" "That's the thing. I have no idea. Everyone were all hush-hush about it, even grunts drinking in back alleys. I learned that some new admiral came along with a massive fleet and put everyone on high alert." "And that would make every soul walking outside of Hegemony's jurisdiction go to ground even faster than army presence," Mr. Cart said, going back to his pilot's seat. which means we should probably bugger off as quickly as possible before someone decides to impress their new fancy admiral by arresting a crew of random battered shuttle. We're gonna have to try our luck somewhere else.
Can we even make it somewhere else?
Varuna asked. I got online with some of the traders and topped up our fuel. Not that this garbage bin can hold much in the first place. And I got some automated systems unstuck. Should make our everyday hassle a lot easier. Think of it as having 2 additional pairs of hands, which will do most of the boring maintenance for us. Oh, and I even managed to unglitch the reactor a bit. Had to turn off some non-critical systems for it, but at least now we won't glow like a star on everyone's sensors.
Nice. Good job, boss. But which non-critical systems exactly have you powered down?
Varuna asked, her breath getting a bit short. Oxygen recycling, her boss replied. And pressure systems. Now, don't give me that look, I know it's not perfect, but we already have to sit in the cockpit in our envirosuits anyway, so we might as well just keep them on at all times. Surely being uncomfortable for a few days is better than attracting attention at every single patrol and pirate in the system.
Yeah, I suppose I can't argue there,
the woman said, clearly wanting to argue. This ship was already uncomfortable enough without wearing a spacesuit all the time, but in their circumstances there really was no other option, so she decided to just move along, fell into her seat and asked,
"Where do you want to go next then? Asharu's close."
I'd rather not risk going to Asharu, not after that mess a few months ago. Mr. Cat was very clearly embarrassed even mentioning the place, so I decided we're going to Garnier. We still have some friends there.
We don't have friends, boss. We have business associates, which is only a step above of having mortal enemies. But we may work something out there, so let's go. The sooner we get some money, the sooner we'll be able to ditch this flying coffin.
And so to Garnier they went. A local nest of organized crime huddled in a few underground bunker cities, buried deep in the ice of an inhospitable, frozen planet. It was an uneventful journey, too uneventful for Mr. Cart's taste, and the reason for that became obvious when they were about a day away from the place, when their sensors suddenly showed an entire sea of red dots. "What the hell is this?" Mr. Cart asked, frantically flicking all controls on his console to turn off their engines and hide. "No, it can't be what it says here. We must be glitched again." Varuna looked over his shoulder at the screen and shook her head.
"Don't think we are, boss. No glitch could fake those signatures. See here? Hegemony cruisers. Looks like they're attacking Garnier Station. And it looks like they scored a few hits already."
For the next few minutes they just stared at the screen in dreadful silence, trying to make sense of the dots and blips. To an inexperienced spacer, they wouldn't mean much. To them, however, it was enough to know that their destination was currently being steadily blown apart, compartment after compartment. Thousands of people lived on that station, and now Hegemony Fleet did its level best to turn every single one of those people into space dust. Granted, a lot of those people were pirates, smugglers, or other kind of outlaws, but seeing this devastation in almost real time left the crew of temporary replacements speechless. Finally, after a few minutes of silence, Mr. Cart finally broke it and said, "Asharu it is, then." Varuna nodded, still quiet. Garnier wasn't a good place, not by any measure, and its inhabitants were not good either. But she knew some decent people there, and could only hope they managed to escape before that fleet started its siege. There was nothing she could do to help them now, though, so after another minute she just turned around and came back to her cramped cabin, and sent a few messages. That, however, wasn't the end of their issues. After a few more days of traveling, Valiant Replacement made its way to Asharu Station, a port orbiting a poor desert planet, technically unaffiliated with any major faction in the system. But, as it turned out, that technically part was no longer viable.
"Same thing as on Jangala, boss,"
Varuna said, coming back to the ship after touring the space station for several hours.
"Hegemony showed up a few weeks back and left an entire garrison here. Both on the surface and on the station itself. Everyone who could give us a job was either arrested, outright shot, or gone to the ground. Turns out the Admiralty Board decided to go all in for their attack on Garnier."
So it would seem. Damn, that new admiral must be a right smart bastard. It's been ages since they mobilized an attack on such a scale. By now they're probably in control of both orbital station and the planet itself, Mr. Cart replied, his voice betraying a hint of begrudging respect towards Hegemony Navy.
"That's the thing, they didn't capture it,"
Varuna said, much to her boss's surprise.
They blasted out sections of the station, docks, fuel depots, defensive platforms, bombed the core for a few hours and left. Apparently their marines only jumped onto the station for a few minutes, shot a bunch of fools who were not smart enough to hide and left.
Which probably means they got what they wanted, or maybe they just wanted to send a message.
Maybe. Garnier certainly won't be able to supply many ships right now, which means Hegemony will have pretty much full control over the shipping lanes. Maybe they just want to starve the planet instead of risking their men in open assault.
Mr. Cart nodded to that. Varuna had experience with the Navy, so he deferred to her knowledge whenever military subjects were talked about. But from what she gathered on Ashara Station, it seemed that the fleet that blasted Garnier's defenders to bits was already gone, which meant that they could try and see if one of their contacts there was still alive. Unfortunately, the crew of Valiant Replacement wasn't so lucky. When they arrived at Garnier Station a few days later, the place couldn't really be called a station anymore. A field of debris orbited a battered core of the station, with rapidly assembled makeshift docks extending from it to service a handful of equally heavy damaged ships. The people working on those docks were tired, hungry, and many of them were wounded, but when Varuna stepped out of the ship to see the situation with her own eyes, she saw a certain pride on the faces of the locals. Hegemony attacked them, was the general word on the street, and they were still here. Clearly, that must have meant that the damned tyrants from Chickamostok were afraid of Garnerians. Oh, well, that's just what Garnerians told themselves to feel better. Unfortunately for our heroes, however, the channels they used to contact their associates both on the station and on the surface were silent, which meant that this lead was yet another bust. Still, the crew of Valiant Replacement remained in the area for a few days, salvaging debris from around the place and hauling it back to the station. Wasn't much, but the locals did pay them a few scraps of escrets for their effort, not to mention that they gained some gratitude as well. But after around a week, it was clear that if Varuna and Mr. Cart wanted to escape rapidly approaching poverty, they would have to look for a job elsewhere, and Mr. Cart already had a plan in mind. One day he was doing something on a computer and Varuna looked at him, inputting a new course into the command console, and her eyes widened.
No, boss, don't even think about it. We are not going to Chalcedon, even if we have to starve for it. Whatever you have planned, it's not worth it, especially since you're not the one going down there to talk to them. And I'm not going to barca myself up from head to toe just because some technophobe would pop a blood vessel seeing my comm implants. And you can't go down there either, because if they'll see how orged up you are, they'll probably burn you on a stake as Shaitan himself.
He nodded and kept tapping in the coordinates. Yep, agree with you on that, but I wasn't planning to go to Chalcedon. We're gonna swing near it though, to grab a cache I hope is still floating next to the abandoned space station there. Won't be anything special, but it should keep us afloat for a few more weeks. And then we'll go somewhere else. People always focus on the Pathos and forget that there are other inhabited worlds in Kumari system.
What, you mean we're going to Canny? I've never been there before. You think that place is any better than Chalcedon?
Better? Yes. Any good? Hell no. The inhabitants are pretty much your usual self-serving lawless scum, similar to the ones you can find on Garnier or everywhere else. Warlords, drug dealers, pirates and gangs everywhere. But because they're so close to the ludic path, no one really bothers to go there and mess with them. Made them softer than most of the outlaws in the sector, more approachable. And business is always good there because no inspections bother them, so we're bound to find some paid job there.
Here's hoping. Very well then, let's go,
Varuna said and sealed her envirosuit. This would be a long trip and she already could imagine how bad she and the entire ship would smell at the end of it. Maybe she thought she could just get herself an artificial nose, just like her boss did. Luckily, the trip was uneventful, though Mr. Cart's secret stash was far less impressive than Varuna expected, containing only a handful of escreds, and, after around 2 weeks, they docked their slowly falling apart vessel on the Canny station, desperate to find any source of income, because at this rate, they soon wouldn't be able to even afford fuel and would end up stranded or, even worse, forced into a life of a planet dweller, which for any serious spacer was a fate worse than death. Fortunately, this time things were about to change, and as Miss Europa turned one of the bars on the dock with a drink in her hand, she suddenly spotted a shifty-looking woman staring at her from one of the tables.
"Aye, madam? Can I help you?"
Varuna said, slowly approaching the woman.
"I hope so,"
she said, raising her glass towards the guest and motioning to an empty stool next to her.
But I'll be honest, I have to ask first, just what exactly is a little dove like yourself doing here? Well, madam, I was... she mumbled, fiddling with her sleeve. Don't worry, girl, you can be honest here. I was thinking that you looked nervous, but now I'm sure of it. Just calm down, eh? Take a deep breath, collect your thoughts and tell me what's going on. Thank you, madam. Verona's eyes gleamed in the dark. You see, madam, me and my better half, we're looking for a job. Any job, really. Well, paid one, that is. You see, we managed to save up enough money to get ourselves a shuttle and we thought we could go somewhere together, you know? But our parents, they're not happy about it and they left us with nothing and we're out of everything, really. Running out of food, fuel, even water. But we don't want to beg, madam, and we were told by some man in the dock that we could always look for work here in the bar. So here we are. We? And where's that better half of yours? The woman asked, suddenly curious. Oh, I think he's trying his luck on the market square on the other side of the corridor. We don't really have time to do everything together now. I see. Well, it doesn't matter anyway. What matters is that you may be in luck, girl. You and your boy, you have a ship. I have a few cargo containers that need delivering. I'm pretty sure we can help each other there. That would be grand, madam. We don't have much space on our shuttle, though. It's just an old Kate model. Not to worry, girl. The goods that need delivering are not very bulky. In fact, they're quite a rarity indeed, especially in the place I want them delivered to. The medicines, you see. Medicines for less fortunate people who can't afford one of Hegemony's more expensive clinics or hospitals. I understand, madam, Verona said, truthfully. She had some experience with Hegemony's healthcare back in the day. We'll gladly deliver these goods, but you'd have to tell us where you need them first. Of course. Sorry, I got worked up a bit. You see, I need them at Nachiketa, the woman said, and clearly expected some kind of reaction, but since Verona was still just staring at her with earnest determination, she continued, well, yes, Nachiketa, or the station orbiting it, I don't rightly mind. My friends on the receiving end will make it work anyway. And I'm sure we can agree on this price, she said, pushing a small datapad towards Verona, and then immediately took it away as her eyes went wide. But only upon delivery. I understand your difficult situation, I really do, but I simply can't hand off so much expensive goods without at least some insurance they won't end up sold on some random black market. I'm sure you understand my predicament as well. Of course, madam, Verona replied eagerly. We won't disappoint you, especially since we need that money just as much as your friends need their medicines. We'll get right to it. Good. Send me the number of your ship and my people will send the cargo containers there. It's settled then. Oh, and one more thing, girl. Do make sure that no Hegemony patrol catches you with those goods. If they do, I'm afraid our deal will have to be cancelled, and I won't be able to help you out there. Wait, are we going to be doing something illegal? Verona asked, with sheer disbelief in her voice. According to Eagle's bureaucrats, yes. But let me ask you this, girl. Is dying because you're poor and can't afford overly expensive healthcare illegal? In that case, is being poor in itself illegal? If yes, then you, me, and pretty much everyone else in the sector is a criminal. It doesn't matter what some officials say. What matters is that we do what is right. And you have a chance to do exactly that and get paid for it, as long as you're careful, of course. Unless you want people to die because of some pointless rule, written by some office drone who is completely disconnected from reality. Of course not, Verona replied. As I said, we'll do it. I was just afraid we'll be transporting something dangerous. Anything can be dangerous if used in a wrong way, the woman said, including things like laws and regulations. But never mind that. I'd suggest you get a move on. After all, we're both on a strict timetable here. And, with a quick handshake, the deal was made and both women went their separate ways, as if they had nothing to do with each other. Verona risked a little sly smile on her way out of the bar. Things went surprisingly well, all things considering. She probably could have demanded a higher payment, but there was a lot of burly, rough people around the place, and a number of them were very interested in the conversation, so it probably wasn't worth the risk. Best to just do the job quickly, she thought, collect the money and get back on their feet, which she also understood was not going to be that straightforward as the woman in the bar pretended it to be. Smuggling illegal cargo was nothing new in the Persean Sector.
but certain worlds were more difficult to reach than others, and Nachiketa was certainly very close to the top of the list of those hard targets. It was Hegemony's main fuel processing facility, which meant the Navy patrols orbited the world all the time and were composed of people who shot first and asked questions never. But there was no other choice, so they had to make it work. Hopefully, Varuna thought, her boss had some ideas on how to do it.
"I got us a new job, boss," she said a few minutes later as she entered the ship. "Good old cargo delivery."
"Yep, I saw a live stream from your implant," Mr. Cat replied, fastening an unmarked cargo container in the hold. "And I checked the cargo already. As expected, it's a small layer of herbal medicines and an entire fuckload of hardcore drugs. We could take one of those containers and be high until the end of our lives. But yeah, it's a drug run. And to Nachiketa, no less. I wonder if she didn't send us there just to get caught as decoys for something else. Which means we're gonna have to be a bit crafty out there."
"Think we can slip past them, boss?"
"We'll have to. We'll think of something. And in the meantime, I have to say, it's really concerning how well your innocent puppy eyes work on people. I'm starting to wonder just how often you use them on me."
"Aw, shucks, boss. I never try something so underhanded on you,"
she replied, lying. "Yeah, that fills me with confidence," Mr. Katz said, but he was clearly not concerned at all. "Also, really, Varuna, your better half?"
"Aye, doesn't it fit perfectly with the trope?" she replied, gleaming. "A pair of star-crossed lovers somehow got lucky, got themselves a ship, and now are going towards the stars, to get themselves robbed, killed, or enslaved. A bit of a romance is always enough to make people act stupid, even those who just want to use that romance for their own need."
"Yeah, sure. But if I recall correctly, last time you tried a bit of romance, we ended up with a ludic battlecruiser exploding with its entire crew on board."
"What can I say, boss? Every romantic story needs a bit of drama, doesn't it?"
"Maybe. Just make sure we're not the ones exploding, though." And with that, they strapped in, launched their coughing engines, and set a course for Naraka system, where they'd somehow have to deliver a very illegal cargo to one of the most protected worlds in the sector. It was time for Cart Logistics to make a name for itself, or become one of those countless tales about people who didn't make it.